Hey, 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 Travel Brats. Happy Travel Brat Tuesday. It's Soph and Nat.
Hey, hey.
And today I want you to imagine that it's 1848 and you're a miner in a small town called Sonora. You're here for the gold rush that is sweeping the state, and the town you're in was dubbed the Queen of the Southern Mines. It is one of the oldest cities in California. By 1849, the population of Sonora will be 5,000, and it will remain that way for the next 125 years. Years.
Wow. This place sounds pretty cool, Nat.
Yeah. So, as I said, Sonora is the place where we are. And I want to talk a little bit about the history of Sonora. Of course, I started us off in 1848, but today the city of Sonora totally maintains its historical charm. It's one of those cities that when you go, you feel like, oh, I could take a picture of parts of these cities and be in the mid-century 1800s. It has
Wow.
that kind of feel about it, as I said, a charm about it. I mean, they've really kept up that sense of history, and many of its existing buildings, including the Sonora Opera Hall, the Tulum County Museum, which was originally a jail, and the Tulum County Courthouse, date back to the 1800s.
Wow.
So it's cool, as with any city in our country that has rich history, like a lot of these cities that are on the East Coast, especially in the north, that have early 17, even 1600s with some of the settlers, this history from the 1600s and 1700s. And of course, California as a state did not become, it didn't even become a state until much later, but it didn't become part of the American culture at large really until the gold rush.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the gold rush. We'll get to that here and there as we go through. But the reason why I'm taking you to this cute little gold rush mining town of Sonora is because I visited my boyfriend Matt there last year. He was doing a show at a theater called Sierra Repertory Theater, and it's
Shout
in
out.
the area. Yeah, shout out. Great spot. They do a lot of really great shows. And for this particular time, they were doing the show Jersey Boys, which Matt has now done 4 times.
That's
And
amazing.
he loves the show. It's a fantastic show. But because we were in this cute little town, we were able to do some exploring around Sonora, as well as some of the other places nearby, which included a beautiful lake with mountains in the background called Pinecrest, which I will definitely mention in this episode because Sonora itself is pretty small. So when you're exploring, you really could, in our episode about San Francisco, I did San Francisco in a day, but San Francisco is the kind of place where you could spend a week there and really hone in on specific parts of the city. Whereas Sonora felt like, oh, this really truly is the kind of place that is lovely for a day trip.
Yeah.
There's some great history there. There's some cool spots around it. So for me, growing up in the North Carolina mountains and being used to the terrain here in North Carolina with its lakes and its mountains being very lush and a
Mm.
different kind of freshwater experience, it's it was just so different than what I found in this area because first of all, California, and I'll tell you what, I wouldn't necessarily use the word plush for this particular area of California. And Sonora is not far from Yosemite.
Yeah.
So if you think about Yosemite, that should give you a clue as to what this area is like. And
Mm.
it's so like some of these. lakes and the mountains, like, it's more rocky terrain, and it's not really covered in grass or brush, um, or, like, fluffy trees. Like, in North Carolina where I grew up, it's like you go to the lake, and it's just truly the mountains look fluffy. Like, the trees are
Mm,
so full, and it's not as, I don't wanna say barren because it really is so beautiful in such a different way, but the trees look a little bit more like evergreen types if
yeah,
they do have green on them, and then the ones that don't have green on them look kind of like desert-esque,
yeah.
and they look almost like not dead, but, like, there is kind of this, like,
It's
just
dry.
a dry desert look to them, and so when Matt and I went with a few friends to this area called Pinecrest, which I'll talk about, we relaxed on this sandy beach area of the lake, and then we went cliff jumping and paddle boating and
Ooh.
kayaking, but the water was so stinking cold.
Oh, yeah, because it's literally it's not
Oh
Tahoe, but it's cold like snow
my
water.
gosh. Yes, I mean, it's fresh water, but it is so, so cold. So we had a great time. I'll tell you, like, my cliff jumping days are over. Like, I just don't, it is fun. It has to be a certain level of height for me. I'm not gonna, like, go on the crazy high cliffs, but growing up in North Carolina, as I said, I went to lots of lakes and did lots of cliff jumping in my, like, middle school and high school and early college days, which was a lot of fun, but I'm not as much of, like, "Yeah, I'll just jump off a mountain. Who cares?"
Right.
And this area in California it's just more rugged. It's just a little bit scarier, and the cliff jumping was not as enticing to me, and so I stayed happily in the paddle boat while everyone else, like, there were a couple other people that were in kayaks, and so those of us that decided not to jump off of the cliffs, we just took pictures and took videos of the others from
I'm
the boat.
I'm here for that. I mean, the biggest thing for me, because I am a bit of like an adventurous travel brat, but the thing for me is the cold water. Like I hate cold water. And this honestly reminds me a little bit when you're talking about more of the dry ruggedness. Obviously, it's not going to be so similar to Colorado, but it's probably more similar to like the mining towns with lakes in Colorado than it is to like more of the East Coast where you were. And yeah, that water I've only done that once, and literally, I just felt like my entire body was going into shock, and that happens. So I don't want that to happen for real. So I would again stay and take pictures. But if you're one of those cold water people, a lot of people have fun getting
The
that cool dip. I mean, I know my brother will just in water like that, he will just swim with his
Yeah,
dog,
and
like
it
for
doesn't matter. Some people,
yeah,
they
for like
really
30
don't care
minutes.
the temperature. They'll just dive in, and I will say, like, the day that we went was a particularly hot day. Like, it gets really hot in this part of California. So I I think on some level the water was very refreshing, but it was such a shock to my body that I personally wasn't as drawn to, like, going, but I did go all the way in. I was proud of myself. I got under the water and I was
Good
like,
for
"All
you,
right,
Nat.
this North Carolina girl is getting in her California freshwater, cold experience." But kind of like you said, with Colorado, it's alpine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like some areas are like alpine desert-esque, and this is
Mm-hmm.
a totally different kind of terrain, which I'll talk about in a different part of this episode later on, as far as like the terrain and how to prep when you visit a place like this. But Pinecrest was a really beautiful spot, and we'll be posting pictures on our socials about it, so you'll just see what we're talking about as far as the kind of ruggedness and the more rockiness, but the water is just so beautiful, and this was just like a really fun kind of trip that we took with some of the cast members to go to Pinecrest. It's not too far from Sonora, so I would consider it still within this area of like Sonora at large, but Sonora, while has its, cute historical charm, it doesn't have as much of the, like, outdoor activities as an area like Pinecrest would have. Okay, so I mentioned the theater that I visited Matt at. It was called Sierra Repertory Theater. They are still in existence, a great spot. So if you're ever in the Sonora area, I would definitely say check them out. And near the theater is the Columbia State Historic Park. I mean, I'm fairly certain that the theater essentially sits like in the park. Like I don't know that it is considered part of the historic park, but it is definitely right next to it. And this particular area, as I mentioned when talking about Sonora's historical charm, this is a place where a lot of the gold rush history of the area is highlighted, and people can enjoy learning about that time period and then also enjoy some of the historical aspects of the town's origins. So people can, like, again, learn about the gold rush history, but also like shop in the little areas where they have like little kind of, like if you've ever been to some of the historical places on the East Coast and you
Mhm.
can buy little things that are kind of remembrances of the Revolutionary War. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You can buy
Yeah.
little trinkets and little things and that kind of, so there's definitely that kind of like touristy kind of stuff. And they have like games you can play and different kinds of things you can do, like wagon rides and stuff that kind of gives you that gold rush era vibe. And I mean, the history of the gold rush is so interesting anyway. And
Right.
I actually, maybe we can take this moment, Sophia, to do some gold rush trivia.
Oh
Bow, bow, bow,
boy. Bow, bow,
bow, bow.
bow. Oh no, here we go.
Aren't you excited? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
travel brats.
Okay, Sophia, so here's some Gold Rush trivia, just because I find this era very fascinating. This whole like the new frontier, we're gonna go out to California and we're gonna find all these exciting things. So the Gold Rush was one of the largest migrations in American history.
Is that true or false?
Oh no, this is trivia. So this is all just facts.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna test me and
That
I
would be
started
really fun.
sweating.
No, you're good, girl. You don't have to answer any questions this time around.
Yay!
So, yeah, that is a fact. It is true, not false, that the Gold Rush was one of the largest migrations in American history, which is so random and so cool, but it was because it was a very exciting time and everyone, the grass is always greener
Yeah.
idea, and so everyone wanted to go that way. So, the Gold Rush started in 1848, which is where I started this episode. But it was popularized in 1849. That's really when more people started coming over. As things go, especially in that era, it takes time for news to really get to people. So although the gold rush became a thing in 1848, it really, yeah, it wasn't popularized till 49, which is where we get the phrase 49ers, because
Yeah, the 49ers.
prospectors moved to California in 1849.
San Fran 49ers.
Exactly. Isn't that
And
cool?
yeah, that is cool. And also the fact that this took so long to, get to the rest of the East Coast United States because they don't have like cell phones and
Yeah, right?
and the media. Yeah.
It's so wild. Yeah, just how news had to travel in 1848. But the reason why there was so much gold in the
Mm.
California mountains was because over millions of years ago, volcanoes, erosion, and tectonic plates concentrated billions of dollars worth of gold in that area. So
Wow.
just because of the earth doing the things that it does, it created gold.
And you know how positives always come with the negatives, you know? Well, you got the gold and then you got all the earthquakes from the tectonic plates.
Exactly. So kind of,
Hey.
the San Francisco earthquake, the San Francisco fire, like you hear about all these different crazy geographical happenings that go on in California that, yes, bring about beauty and wondrous things like all of this gold that was so rich in this state. But then, yeah, still to this day, they deal with all of these earthquakes and other kinds of things that are, Problematic, but hey, gold. And then the last piece of trivia that is especially fun for me, as I mentioned earlier in this episode and have mentioned many times to our travel brats, that I was raised in North Carolina. But apparently, the first gold rush actually happened in North Carolina and not
Oh,
in California. Gold was found in North Carolina 50 years before it was even discovered in California.
wow. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
And I don't know why. I mean, obviously, the gold in North Carolina was not as like it wasn't as prolific
Right.
as
Right.
gold in California. Like California's gold, as I said, billions of dollars worth of gold. North Carolina's gold was not nearly the amount, and it probably was all mined pretty quickly and removed. So because North Carolina is not known for being a state that has a lot of earthquakes or erosion or like tectonic plate activity. So
Right.
I'm not exactly sure how those gold mines were created, but again, it was not as significant as the gold that was found in California, but I just thought that was kind of a fun little factoid about like we always associate the gold rush with California. And technically the gold rush is a very unique to California thing. There was
Yeah.
not a gold rush in North Carolina. It was just
Right.
like, "Oh, we found some gold. This is pretty much it. Okay, we're done." You know?
Yeah, but that's an interesting thing to think about because you had, the original 13 colonies were settled way before, you had all this colonization out west. And so you think about like the gold that's found in Colorado, and then you keep going west. And,
Yeah,
when you kind of get out of the Rockies and under the coastline, there again, the gold rush in California, but the original, gold mining was all in those like 13 colonies, North Carolina, South
yeah,
Carolina, So that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's a fun
yeah.
fact. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so random. But I think these towns like Sonora, they really I think they're really smart to
Yeah.
highlight their gold rush history just because that really is what the area is known for. And especially with Sonora being crowned the queen of the Southern mines. I just love that. I love that that's what it was called and that it has such a rich history when it comes to that. So it's just it's cool. The terrain is really cool. The area is really cool. And I think this theater is really great. So of course I'm always plugging theaters. I love good theaters. So Sierra Rep definitely has good production quality. I think they do really good work. And as I said, I visited last summer, and I would say that is a really great time of year to go to this particular area of California. We did our episode on San Francisco, and it's not too far from San Francisco. It's a slightly different as we said, I mean, San Francisco has its own climate. It literally has its own fog. You know,
Right.
it really is its own kind of climate beast, but it's similar in the fact that I would encourage people to go at this time of year. I mean, it could get pretty hot during the day, but as with Colorado and places like that, it's the dry heat. So,
And it's
it's
nice.
definitely hot, but it gets so refreshing in the evening. It is so lovely. And so the spring and early fall might be the best time to go if you don't love hot temperatures during the day. They're gonna have a little bit more of that temperate climate. You
hmm
know, it's gonna be more pleasant during the day and probably significantly cooler in the evening, but you just when you go to California, especially, like, Northern California, you just have to think about layers.
Yeah,
What I mean?
anywhere you go because you always have the nighttime cool down.
Always have
That's
the
like
cold.
Arizona, Colorado, all those western
Yep.
places. And then also it could be a little chillier also than even like Colorado and Arizona and places like that because you're by the water. And so you have the condensation and the humidity and you have the breeze of the ocean.
Yeah,
So
for
it can get
sure.
even cooler at night.
I think what's interesting about Sonora is that it is mountainous. I
hmm
wouldn't say it's as mountainous as, like, the Lake Tahoe area. They're, like but they're still it's interesting because this area is known as the Sonoran Desert, which is actually a subtropical desert biome. That
Huh.
basically just means that the summers are hot and the winters are mild.
Yeah.
Although I had friends who worked at Sierra Repertory Theater in the winter, and they experienced very heavy snows while they were
Wow.
there. So I think that overall, the winters are going to be more mild than you would find in like Colorado, but you
Hmm.
still have the chance of getting some pretty intense snows here and there. So overall, it really just depends on what you like because for me, I mean, I live in Florida now. I love a good hot day. I
Right.
love a warmer day. That is my preference, but I also really love a cooler evening. And so
Right.
having that kind of, oh, I can get my kind of like fallish feel. I can put my coat on in the evening, but I can dress in a tank top and shorts during the day and feel very summery. So I loved being there in the summer, but from some of my research just on what other people were saying, a lot of people were saying that the spring and fall being more temperate, I think most people lean toward a more temperate type of weather whenever they're visiting somewhere. And so my suggestion would be if you don't love really warm temperatures during the day, focus on going in the spring or the fall. Either way, no matter when you go, it is a beautiful part of the country. I
Yeah.
I mean, we would just be driving through these these hills through Sonora and through this whole area at large. And I was just so captivated by how beautiful it was. And again, as I've said multiple times throughout this episode, just how different it was than the area in which I grew up. And I love exploring different terrains. I love seeing how trees grow in different places. That's interesting to me, and it tells
Yeah.
me a lot about the kind of area you're in. So that was fun for me to get to explore, but I loved Pinecrest. That was again the spot where we actually spent time at the lake, and that was a highlight for me when visiting this area.
I think that's really cool. I'm a sucker for like historic old towns, especially the mining towns. Like an example would be Colorado, Georgetown, Leadville. They have a ton, but this sounds really cool. And I don't know what the exact proximity to like Yosemite and say even like Sacramento is because I've got a bunch of family out in Sacramento, and that's
Yeah,
kind of when you get to those rolling hills, and then obviously like the trees, the like just the forest. If you have a little bit of that Yosemite forest, and then you've got a little bit of that coastal
yeah,
sea and sun. And like, I just think this would be such a beautiful place to take a
yeah.
getaway to.
And especially as you said about Sacramento, I think if you were to like fly in and out of Sacramento or visit Sacramento, this really is a great like day trip or 2-day trip from Sacramento. There were a couple people that worked at the theater that either lived in Sacramento or had family in Sacramento. So I Sacramento really is fairly close. And Yosemite is close, but Yosemite is its own thing. Like Yosemite is its own like day trip. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like you're not going to want to try to do a place like Sonora and Yosemite, but all along the way as you're driving to Yosemite, you're going to hit these small towns like this who are these pop-up towns from the gold rush era where people would stop and businesses developed in these little places because these miners needed to eat every stop of the way,
Right.
right?
And I think we talk about hidden gems, and this is just the perfect example. I
Yeah.
mean, on the weather note too, I will say that, a lot of travel brats listening will probably be like, snow, cold, what? Because when you think of California, if you've never been, I think a lot of people
Just Southern
directly,
California.
yes, deviate to SoCal. LA, it's going to be nice and warm. San Francisco's rainy and it's cooler, but like this, because it has the condensation from the ocean, it can still snow because it gets cold enough because you're not in
Well, and
SoCal.
it's higher elevation. I mean, look at
It's high
pictures of
elevation.
Yosemite. You are in the mountains. Like you are there. And it's it just bumps up, the more you get into California, the higher the elevation just continues to go. And so yeah, it definitely California is a massive state, but I for sure before visiting associated it way more with like pleasant beachy weather, you
Right.
know? And as I said, this summer the days were really hot, but it's it's something that is just yeah, it's so interesting to explore the state of California because it's so massive and the terrain is so different at any given point of the state. I feel like, I mean, our country is so incredible because some of our states are bigger than entire countries.
From
And
sea to shining sea.
yeah, and so there's so much like land diversity aside
Yeah.
from just human diversity and architectural diversity and all of that. But I think, California is so rich in its diverse landscaping.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have such a cool I mean, I just always laugh at like I think Europe is spectacular. It's older. There's just so many different things there than there are here because it is older, with, religious buildings and castles and all that. But if you think about the landscape, I mean, you've got the Smokies, you've got the Rockies, you've got the a biome like this, the subtropical desert biome in California. Then you go to SoCal and you have like hot, sunny, sexy beaches. Then in Florida, you have like the actual rainforesty jungles and alligators. I mean, there's just so much to see in this country. And I think in each state, I mean, you have a state like
Yeah.
California and it stretches so far. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those places where you could spend a year starting in NorCal and making your way down to SoCal, the bottom, making your way down to Mexico. Shoot, go to Mexico, with all the
From
beautiful stops
Canada
along the
to
way.
Mexico, or I guess, well, Cali is you'd be more in like Oregon, Washington. So you could start in Canada, go through Washington, Oregon, California, down to Mexico. I mean, really, I have friends who have done that trip and have really enjoyed all of the different things that they've seen along the way. And one of my friends who now lives in California, one of our travel brats, Caroline, she's my college roommate.
Shout out to
She
Caroline.
has lived in California for the last couple of years and made it a point to visit all of the state's parks.
Oh, nice.
Some of
Oh,
the like, California has a lot of national parks and state parks, and I think I may have to ask her, but I think she's hit up pretty much all of them, at least the state parks. Then there's just so much to do and see,
right.
and it's just so cool. So, she has told me many stories, and I've seen many pictures of all of the different places that she's been within the state, and I was really glad to get to experience this part of the state because I mean, if Matt had not been doing a show in this area of California, I never would have visited on this particular trip because I was so excited about San Francisco. But
Right.
and to be able to spend some time in Sonora and in Pinecrest and this county in general to see the other parts and get again a little bit of the gold rush feel was really neat.
Yeah. Well, that's fabulous. Natalie, this was awesome. I learned so much about Sonora and I definitely want to go. And I hope our travel brats do too.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk to you guys next time.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.